Okay, sorry about that. Welcome back. Hopefully you guys caught the end of that. So again, with continued investment in Latin America, we see continued U.S. military intervention, and we do see military interventions in Latin America several times in the early 1900s, including in the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Nicaragua, where we actually land 2,500 or so Marines in 1912. So again, dollar diplomacy doesn't necessarily, preclude military intervention, and in some cases, it sort of necessitates it. So keep that in mind as well. Just because we invest in places doesn't mean that the military doesn't have to get involved. In terms of trust busting in Taft's presidency, we do see Taft as a very effective trust buster. Again, remember that had been one of Teddy Roosevelt's sort of it's sort of a place where he hung his hat. But as we know, Taft actually is way more of a trust buster than Roosevelt. And in fact, if you look at the numbers, and I mentioned this to you guys yesterday, Taft manages to break up twice as many trusts as Roosevelt in only one term, whereas Roosevelt's going to serve two terms and break up half again as many as Taft. So we see Roosevelt in 8 years or so break up 44 trusts, whereas Taft in only 4 years is going to break up about 90 trusts. So Standard Oil is actually broken up under Taft. You guys can see all the companies that sort of are born from Standard Oil. And this just, I kind of think, shows you guys how big Standard Oil really was. If you look at the companies that you may know today that sort of emerged from Standard Oil over time, including Amoco, Chevron, Exxon, Mobil, BP, Marathon eventually. I mean, all these come from what was once Standard Oil, which is broken up, under that Sherman Antitrust Act. It was split into 34 different companies. And so, of course, this encourages competition and is of benefit to the consumer. Taft also tries to break up U.S. Steel, which actually angers Roosevelt when he hears about it, because he had actually brokered some of the U.S. Steel mergers. Because remember, with Roosevelt, there was such thing as both good and bad trust. So he sees, trust as not inherently evil, but he does believe that they can be if they are used to abuse the consumer and to take advantage and to choke competition. So Taft as trust buster is definitely very effective. Now, one of the biggest demands of the progressives had been a lower tariff. If you guys understand what progressivism is about, you can see why that would be, right? The tariff protects business to the detriment of the consumer. And one of the things that the progressives were most interested in was economic reform and, making sort of more of an equitable and equal playing field for people in terms of money. And so this lower tariff is going to be a key demand of the progressives. Now, Taft actually pushes for a lower tariff, but then he sort of gets hijacked by Congress and the more conservative Republicans in Congress, and they push him to sign a tariff that is higher than he had initially promised to sign. That tariff bill is called the Payne-Aldrich bill, or the Payne-Aldrich tariff. Taft does compromise with the more conservative Republicans who are looking out for big business and signs this tariff. And this really angers progressives within the Republican Party, because they feel like Taft sold them out. Here he is signing this high-priced tariff law to the benefit of business, whereas progressives believe that obviously business needs to be reined in. So this angers progressives in the party. He also gets into a dispute with Gifford Pinchot, who had been Teddy Roosevelt's head of the Forest Service. Pinchot criticizes him publicly for exposing certain lands to development. And when this happens, when Pinchot criticizes Taft publicly, Taft fires Pinchot. And so, again, this is more of a blow to the progressive members of the party, because they see this as an attack on conservation. They begin to turn on Taft, whereas the conservative members of the party, they're all Republicans, they begin to more closely embrace Taft, right? And I think they see him as sort of more easy to influence and kind of more easy to control, obviously, than Roosevelt. So Roosevelt actually returns. He had actually gone on safari in Africa when he left after 1908. He comes back. He's horrified by some of the things that he sees Taft doing, and he starts to sort of speak out against Taft and the old guard conservatives of the party. And so he is going to rally the progressive Republicans, and he starts to make overtures. And I'm talking about Roosevelt. He starts to make overtures to certain people in the party to say that he would be willing to run for a third term in 1912. This is really unconventional in that Taft is a sitting president. He's a Republican and he's the incumbent. I mean, if you have the office, you don't run another candidate. So, what we're going to see is a big split in the Republican Party because the progressives are going to fall in behind Roosevelt and begin to push for a third term, whereas the conservative Republicans will fall in behind Taft and begin to push for his reelection. So, what we're going to see in 1912 is a split in the party. Um, in the convention, the Republicans are going to choose Taft, and they choose Taft, and you would think that Roosevelt would go away. But of course, if you guys have learned anything about Roosevelt, you know that's probably not going to be the case. He's going to refuse to give up and run anyway in 1912. So again, we are going to see a split in the Republican Party in 1912 between the progressives under Roosevelt and the conservatives under Taft. And this cartoon kind of says it all. In 1908, we see Roosevelt handing the nomination to Taft. And then here he is in 1912, the old cowboy demanding that nomination back. So 1912 is going to be a momentous election, and I am excited to talk to you guys about it a little bit on Thursday. So make sure you read tonight and do your questions. And you can start now and get that work done. And I will see you all tomorrow. Behave yourselves.